So, middle school is confusing. It's like you just got dropped into this unfamiliar country where you don't know the map and you don't know the customs and you don't know the language, except that country is just like literally your own body. A lot of changes. It's confusing. It was certainly confusing for me when I was in middle school, which is why a few years later, when my little brother was in middle school, I knew exactly how to make that confusion as entertaining as possible for myself. So I decide to invent a new phase of puberty and convince my little brother that this is going to happen to him. And I come up with what I think is a very scientific, sex ed sounding name for this anatomical phenomenon, which is the word ovarium. Ovarium. Now, an ovarium is something that occurs in the life of every young cisgendered man at some point. And it's kind of like when you lose your baby teeth so that your adult teeth can come in, except it doesn't happen to your teeth. It happens to something that you only have two of. So an ovarium can occur typically between the ages of 12 and 14, and it'll happen at any time and at any place without warning. And when it happens, it will be very messy, and it will be very, very painful. That's an ovarium. So I figure out what I think is going to be a really pretty dead-on way to convince my brother that this is true. We'll call him N tonight just to protect the innocent. And I know I'm going to need a wingman for this, so I recruit my other brother, who's a little bit older than N, and we put our heads together, we get our stories straight, and what we do is we wait in the family room for N to just casually enter at his own leisure. He comes to us. So eventually, he and N enters the room, and when he does, my other brother kicks us off with his opening line. He says, "Cliff, I just got my ovarium in the shower this morning." And I'm like, "Oh my God, how much did it hurt?" And he's like, all I could do was just collapse on the shower floor and try not to scream. So N is hearing all of this, and his natural response is to ask, "Guys, what's an ovarium?" Well, because he asked, we are kind enough to oblige. So we walk him through all of the biological and anatomical inner workings of human testicular shedding. And we explain that, around his age, it's not uncommon to find a boy doubled over in pain on the school bus or writhing and screaming in pain on the floor of the gymnasium. This is all just a normal part of life. And because we're explaining all of this at N's request, he doesn't see any reason at all to question anything that we're telling him. So we have successfully inceptioned our little brother's brain with a completely fabricated phase of puberty, and a horrifying one at that. So this was perhaps the greatest hoax ever perpetrated in the history of Newton Township, Pennsylvania. So N leaves the room. My other brother and I share a high five, pat ourselves on the back, and then proceed to completely forget that we'd ever done or said any of these things. N, on the other hand, does not forget ovariums because his entire world has just been rocked. At some point, my testicles are just going to spontaneously dissolve. He remembers ovariums. And it's just a few weeks later that I see him get home from school. He walks into the kitchen, throws his backpack onto the floor, gets a little glass and fills it with Aldi Sweet Valley Cola and throws it back like it's a shot of wild turkey. And when he turns to look at me, I can see that just he's lost a little bit of the light in his eyes. And he says, "Cliff, we started sex ed today. And Mr. Hughes asked if we had any other questions. So I raised my hand. Yeah, when are we going to talk about ovariums?" Ovariums? You mean like ovaries? No, ovariums. And then this is when my brother goes ahead and explains in graphic detail exactly how an ovarium works. This is in front of his entire co-ed classroom, by the way. And at a certain point, a kid in the back of the room decides to put him out of his misery and interrupts the dissertation and is just like, "Lewis, your brothers were lying to you." Now, as I'm standing in the kitchen hearing this story from my little brother, I am struck by the fact that he doesn't really seem that mad about it. In fact, in the years that follow, he never really holds it against me. No grudge, no snitching, no attempts at revenge. In fact, I had his permission to tell this story tonight, if you can believe that. And I think the reason that this great ovarium hoax of Newton Township, Pennsylvania, ended so moderately well is because as my brother is standing in this classroom, sitting in his desk, explaining this fake stage of puberty invented by his sociopathic older brother in front of his entire co-ed classroom, not a single student laughs. Not a chuckle. No one ever mentions it again. And I think the reason why everyone decided to mercifully cut him a break on this day is because every one of those students in that 6th grade classroom were all struggling to navigate this strange new language of adolescence, feeling every bit as confused and lost as he was, even if nobody had to lose their balls.